Welcome to today's webinar, Driving Down Rising Costs, Strategies for Overcoming Rising Costs in Fleets, presented by AMCS Group. I'm Deborah Lockridge, editor and associate publisher. I'll be your moderator today. I encourage you to ask questions during the webinar at any point. We will try to get to them all, but don't worry, if we don't get to yours, you will be contacted by email afterwards with a response after the event. I'm joined today by our speaker, Dean Vogel. He's the fleet management consultant with AMCS Group. Dean, thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background.
Will do. Thanks, Deborah. Appreciate everything. We really appreciate the opportunity to be able to do this today. And again, as Deborah mentioned, I'm with AMCS. I'm a fleet management consultant. Just a little bit of a background about myself. I joined AMCS, which was formerly Dossier Systems, that many of you may know it as, back in 2015. Bringing around 22, 23 years of experience in fleet and agricultural management to AMCS Dossier. Again, I have an agricultural background. Grew up on a farm. We still have a small farm, so I have a background in maintenance, also parts management, personnel management, and consulting. I initially started my career right out of high school working in a truck service shop in my hometown in Tiffin, Ohio, which Ohio is where I'm based from. A few years later, then I made a transition to a Peterbilt dealership in Findlay, Ohio, and there I worked in all levels of the entire facility, primarily parts, but I worked with the service department. And then after spending some time there, I had the opportunity to work with some government entities and fleets as an account manager with Napa and Kenworth. But then prior to coming on board with AMCS Dossier, I was working with an actual fleet in which implemented a fleet maintenance system and really began to understand the inner workings of an electronic system and the value and benefits it has. And then I had the opportunity to come on board with AMCS. So my responsibilities are generally out in the field. I work in the office doing remote trainings and customer assistance and service. But then I'm also actually on site. I go out and actually do deployments and implementations, train on the functions and features and the cost saving benefits of AMCS fleet maintenance and also their additional platform items. So that's a little bit about me. Again, we appreciate the time and the opportunity, and we'll move forward here and start going through the slides. I think you're going to find this as a really interesting presentation. As we put it together, it really brought a lot of things to the surface to talk about and bring about. So moving on to the first slide. On this slide, we're just talking, pick some general trucking statistics as far as the rising costs associated with the entire industry. For example, in these examples here, we've, as you can see, we pulled them from the July of 2023. Cost of trucking passes suppressed, past $2 a mile. Driver wages going up, reaching 72.5 cents a mile and more. Truck and trailer payments rose up, and then additionally, repair and maintenance costs accounted for 19.6 cents per mile. And, a lot of these costs that are going up, we are seeing them every day, not just in the repair and maintenance world, but just, day to day. So it's going up all over. The true agenda as we go through the presentation today is, again, talk about the costs that are going up. And secondly, then after that, we're going to look at some strategies for overcoming these costs, and then drill down with some tips and best practices within the maintenance world to help, counteract these costs and get them, to the to maintain them and understand them the best way that you can. And then also I got a real life example that I'll share with everyone. Kind of to wrap this all into, one nutshell, so to speak, the spring TMC conference, spring of 2024 conference, the rising costs of maintenance was really a hot topic there. And the number at this point, they're saying it's went up 40% since 2020. So again, a lot of valid information that comes out from the TNC. So it's really interesting to see that and actually tie that in with the presentation. So on this slide, again, we're going to be talking about the 12 points that are here of the rising cost the industry is facing. And the next slide after this, we'll talk about the strategies to overcome these rising costs. Now, during this slide, as I'm going through these 12 points, there's going to be a audience survey that'll be popping up on your screen that we would love you to participate in and get kind of some feedback from the audience as to where you're seeing the most concern in the rising costs. So I'll let you go ahead and complete that while I'm talking through each of these slides, and then we'll look at the results. Obviously, the first one I have on the list here are fuel costs. As we know, fuel is continuously an item that's going up and down. The impact of global oil prices and even alternative fuel options have an effect on that. Next, the tires, the cost of tires. This is continuously increasing. Traditionally, when the fleet where I came from, they were never going down; they always continued to go up. So there's definitely a high cost with tires. Empty miles is another issue that you can encounter that can rise the costs up also. The next one on the list after tires would be truck insurance or insurance in general. There's a lot of factors affecting insurance costs. We have some tips for managing insurance costs we'll talk about. And ironically enough, as we were putting this presentation together, a publication and I subscribed to, flipping through it, and there was an article that was titled Navigating the Rising Trucking Costs, and it talked about insurance. And what it was saying that since the first quarter of 2023, the overall kind of combined number, they've seen like a 6.8% increase in just insurance related for fleets and all insurances in general. And one of the interesting points that they talked about in the article that I really had not given any thought about, but it's definitely something I know of concern all over, not just in the fleet industry, but is that of cybersecurity. But again, that does fall into fleets, because obviously with all the electronics and telematics we have, cybersecurity is a real important piece of that. So again, insurance is definitely a key aspect and key factor of everything that's involved. And I'm just looking here, we have some of the survey results coming in. The repairs and maintenance, that's showing a high percentage. That's one of the top three, followed by fuel, followed by tires. And then, insurance and labor have a tie for that fourth spot. So those are, really good, interesting to see that, because that would be, what I would think would be, the valid numbers from the survey. So that's really interesting to see. So again, thank you for everyone that's participated in that survey. That's really great. Next, moving on to the list here, we have tolls. Again, tolls continue to change depending from state to state, and they can, go, increase just like anything else has. Trying to determine ways to minimize these tolls and reduce these tolls is obviously important, which we'll touch on that on the next slide. Next, financing. Understanding interest rates. What's the best option? Is it Is it best to lease? Is it best to buy? Really what fits your situation, your business model. I've talked with customers and I worked with them out in the field, and sometimes they do a combination. They lease and then they actually, buy. Primarily if they don't have a shop location in an area where they're have a need for trucks, they'll lease it because it's easier to, have the leasing company do the maintenance on it. So again, just options like that. But again, understanding all them financing options can make a difference to the bottom line. Depreciation is the next. The value of the trucks and your equipment obviously decreases over time. This can be a significant cost at the end, because if you get to the point where you're depreciated out and you're putting more money into the piece of equipment or the asset, you got to find out where that happy spot is at, and then phase the equipment out and bring you on board. Next, inventory and parts. Again, a lot of money can be tied up in inventory and parts on your shelves within your shop. I've encountered that being out in the field, and if you think about that inventory that's on the shelf, that's basically money that's sitting on that shelf that potentially could be used in other areas. But if you can reduce that inventory and parts, then you've got less cost there. But in either case, as we all know, the cost of parts are going up, and additionally, as they go up, it's harder to find them. So if you've got to now go out and look for additional ways to get the parts into your facility, you're paying additional freight, which is again driving those parts costs up. Next, recruitment and training. Again, there's high turnover in the industry periodically from time to time, just because of the competitive nature of it. Looking at ways to get these recruits, to get them on board, get them to stay on board, because again, every time that you are bringing new drivers, for example, through the door, there's a lot of cost involved to get those drivers trained and get them in the truck and back out on the road. Next point, labor. Again, labor is continuously an increasing cost that we traditionally see. Again, driver shortages, overtime costs, especially from the shop level, where I spend a lot of my time working with the fleets, trying to find and finding technicians, mechanics is a challenge in the labor force, and keeping them on board and dealing with the competitiveness of that industry between locations also. Next point, regulatory compliance. As we all know, the trucking industry is heavily regulated, and in keeping compliant with all of this can be a real costly endeavor. I mean, it's a lot of time spent on the phone, emails, office time, back and forth with the compliance and all the environmental regulations. So again, creative ways on, hey, how can we make this better? How can we streamline this to get these costs under control, is what we'll talk about again in the next slide. Second to last slide, health and wellness programs. A lot of trucking companies are investing in health and wellness programs. Yeah, there is a cost involved with this, but the offset is, it's like if you can keep everyone healthy and keep everyone in a good physical condition, that's going to make a great difference on the entire organization, to keep the costs down related to your insurance policies and medical cost policies that you would have for your employees. And as a lead into our next webinar that we'll be having, that's going to be talking about safety and wellness. Again, that's not part of this presentation. It'll be the next one that's going to be coming up for everyone to listen in on and enroll into. Again, about safety and wellness. So keep that in mind as you see that coming into your emails. And then last on the list, repairs and maintenance costs. All the costs associated with repairs and maintenance are going up. Whether it's again from the parts side or whether it's at the shop level. And I actually intentionally saved this point for last because in my mind I felt that was really important one to talk about in detail, which we will as we continue through the presentation. But it also really the survey results that I seen really solidified this. So I think it's again a good key topic we'll talk about. So again, to kind of wrap this slide up, through the survey, repairs and maintenance was one of the top four. We had fuel in there, we had tires, and then we had the insurance. So four of the key points that we had were all part of the survey. So I think that was great. Okay, on to now. We've talked about the rising costs. We're going to discuss a few options here on how to offset these rising costs. So starting out with fuel efficiency, what kind of best practices can you implement within your organization to help reduce the excess amount of use of fuel? One way that I find when I'm out in the field as I'm talking with customers on site is that they're trying to utilize route optimization a little bit more. And again, the route optimization has its own kind of a bullet point, but they really kind of tie together, because if you can reduce your route and simplify it, and even if you cut 4 or 5 miles a day off of it, that makes a huge difference at the end of the day, the end of the week. Obviously reducing idling, in any way that's possible, whether it's the option of putting, a separate, heater SPAR system in the sleeper, so that when the truck is, at the rest stop, that the engine's not running, which is multiple ways like that. So again, a lot of kind of sometimes you got to be creative, I feel, for, making these improvements and doing these strategies to keep these costs down and reduce them down. Next, tire management. Again, this is one of the top four that came into the survey. And as I said earlier, the tire costs keep going up. How do we, manage these better, and what do we do to pull your tire expense down within your fleet? I always have been a fan of, talking with the vendors, getting data from the vendors, whether it's, Michelin, Bridgestone, whoever it may be, and, get some of their facts that they have on rolling resistance, testing that they've done, and also really getting the best tire for the application of what you're doing. A good point on this, I was on site last month with a customer in Dallas, and he was explaining to me that, and this customer has refuse trucks, and they were actually being sold brand new, high-priced steer tires. The refuse trucks obviously run in the yards to dump with their loads, so they've actually opted to start changing the steer tires to go with a little bit lesser cost, because they know they're going to get abused, and they've really had a significant reduction in their tire cost just by making that one change. They're not compromising the safety by any means, because they're still putting a newer tire on, but not an over-the-road tire. They're putting per se a local tire on that fits the needs, and they've been really happy with that. Again, related to tires, the standard tire pressure monitoring systems are a great way to keep an eye on the tires to keep the air pressure correct. Alignments, as minimal as that may seem as a point of contention, it's definitely important to keep everything aligned to keep the wear down. And then also, I'm going to throw on tires training, and I'll talk about the training related to tires here when I get into my real world example when we get to the end of the presentation. training on tires, makes a difference too on keeping that cost down. Next, moving on to insurance negotiation. Again, as I mentioned in the article that I read, the insurance costs keep going up. So you have to, again, look at different ways on how you can keep these insurance costs down. Are you better off to, try and self-insure internally, or do you become part of a group that gets a better rate? So, really just, sometimes being a part of, trade groups and associations and having that networking allows those ideas for the insurance to find ways to reduce the rates down. Again, it's always going to be a cost that appears to go up, and just using the best practices internally is really the best option, I feel, on insurances. Again, going to the route optimization, just touching on that again, being able to set these routes up and utilize not only the efficiency of the route, but it's also going to save again on the cost, because if your tires are turning less, you're burning less fuel, again, you're saving a lot on that. One example of that, as far as the route optimization and how it's actually made a huge difference, I think it's 3 or 4 years ago, we had a presentation. I believe his first name was Jack. I can't remember his last name, but anyways, he was with UPS, and he walked us through the process of how they implemented their route optimization and how it all tied together. Now, the key point of this is that it didn't happen overnight. It took discipline and training, but at the end of I want to say the 2 years, once they had totally got this implemented, the amount of savings that it produced was, I don't remember the number, but was very, really substantial. So, a true testament there to the route optimization of what it can do to actually drive the cost down within your fleet in more ways than actually one. Next, financing options. Exploring the best financing options to see what's out there. Just because you've worked with this company for so long doesn't necessarily mean that's the best deal out there. I always encourage everyone, look at 2 or 3 choices and get the facts and the information, and then make a decision. And if it means that you have to make a change to make a better impact on the bottom line, then that's really what you have to do to again help drive the cost down overall to make a positive bottom line. Next is the workforce management. Again, a lot of creative ways that I've encountered when I've been out on the site is to how do you retain folks, how do you keep them on staff, how do you keep them from moving to a different company. A lot of different ways that I've encountered this. Sometimes it's just as simple as having an open house for a lunch, or a gift card to whoever's got the most efficiency in the shop, for example. Same in the office. A lot of again, different ways. It's kind of different for everyone, but again, just being creative, and sometimes the use of technology will help with this workforce management, and being able to work with them and track. For example, if you do a survey that is very open-ended, that you may find that, hey, management's unhappy about something, or the workforce is unhappy about something, you can make those changes and make the organization better to keep the retention in. Next one, reducing empty miles. Again, sometimes easier said than done, but as many times as you can keep the truck loaded or keep the truck full to reduce those empty miles, it's going to make a huge difference on the revenue stream that's coming in. There's a lot of technologies and solutions that that are available through AMCS for helping to manage, this and reduce the empty miles. And again, you have to all, as I think we all understand, depending on what the industry is, there's certain times you have no choice that you're going to be running some empty miles. If you're in the industry of refuse, well, obviously when you take the truck and unload it at the landfill, you're going to have empty miles you've got to run. But it's different for each industry. But being able to be again creative and reduce those empty miles if you are running them, how do you do that internally? What's the best way to do that? Next on the list is warranty recovery. The tracking of warranty is, I feel really important and should be, a continuous improvement process within every organization. Coming from the parts world, I know that there's a lot of parts daily that go in the dumpsters because, number one, people just don't know it's covered under warranty. Being able to recapture and recover that warranty, whether it be in dollars or a part that goes back on your shelf at zero cost, can be really important to drive that, cost again down. So if warranty is not something that you are fully managing today, that's one key piece that I would, highly recommend to look into and dive into. And again, it's not only the warranty on the parts, but the warranty on your actual assets or your, equipment that's rolling down the road. And we'll talk a little bit more about here at the warranty in a couple additional slides, but I just wanted to, again, throw that out there now and point out that it's definitely something that is good to pay close attention to. Next, inventory management. With inventory management, there's a lot of good practices for managing inventory. The four basic functions of management are planning, controlling, leading, and organizing. And I truly believe of those four that the organizing is important, not just in the aspect of parts, but in an organization altogether. But if we're just focusing on parts, having a parts room that's well organized, well laid out, easy to find, the parts you're looking for, and set up by VMRS coding is, really super important for efficiency. Because if you have a mechanic or a technician or even a parts manager that's walking in the parts room and cannot find things in a timely manner, again, time is money, so keeping everything clean and organized is really important. And as I mentioned too about the VMRS, I'm going to talk a little bit about that here on the next couple slides, and then also show you a picture of an actual parts room that I did a reset on, and we did a cleanup, and it made a huge difference on the day-to-day processes of the mechanics and technicians finding the parts. And then last, maintenance of your fleet. Being that this was the number one on the survey, I think this ties in very good with what we're talking about here and trying to, understand and have the strategies to offset these costs. Again, understanding your assets, knowing what your assets are, getting them in the shops to get the PMs done is really important. Just like the abbreviation stands for, the acronym PM stands for preventive maintenance. Yes, you're bringing it in to do those oil changes and services, but it's also important to, look that vehicle over and be proactive and say, hey, while we got it here, we can do this. It looks like it could potentially be an issue, to eliminate those road breakdowns, which are, again, another cost that if you can reduce that down, because as we all know, road calls are very costly and very expensive. And by managing these costs through VMRS, that's a very good way to manage and understand where your costs are at within the fleet. And again, for those that are not familiar with the VMRS, it stands for Vehicle Maintenance Reporting Standards. It's a coding system that's developed by the American Truckers Association. And again, I'll go a little bit more in depth on that on the next slides. But before I move to the next slide, I just wanted to point out here that there's, through AMCS, we have, many software systems and solutions available through our platform. Specifically on the fleet maintenance side, we have our fully web-based system now that's functioning and running very efficiently, and it runs, again, on a mobile device such as a tablet or an iPhone or an Android phone, as well as the as the desktop. Runs very efficient, helps keep cost on the fleet and track it by the VMRS coding. On this slide, I want to talk a little bit about asset management, and we're going to look at the what, the why, and the how. So what are we trying to accomplish and understand? So we want to understand the total cost of ownership of the asset. And that asset could be, a tractor, it could be a trailer, it could also be something, such as an actual plant that is, a production plant. So again, if we can assign a number to it, we can monitor it. And then, know what your costs are and what your expenses are for what you're trying to monitor. Then we lead into the why, okay? Why do we want to do all this? Well, we want to know where the costs are coming from and then make better decisions. And again, these better decisions can be the better decisions of, hey, how do we negotiate with our vendors because we're finding out that we're having an alternator that's failing in the 13th or 14th month, so we potentially want to ask for an extended warranty for alternators, all of which is tied in and reported through by VMRS, and this is leading into how we do it. VMRS, if you're not familiar with it, again, as I mentioned earlier, is a coding system developed by the American Truckers Association that, as a maintenance system, we follow that as our method of tracking within the system. VMRS is built on 3 segments: system level, assembly level, and component level. And what this allows you to do is you can track your parts and your labor costs by these codes, as well as inventory, and it also gives you visibility through warranty. So if we kind of talk about, from going back to the high level again of the system assembly component, is if you kind of think about it as the visual that I usually give everyone when I'm on site is, if you think of like you've got boxes or 5-gallon buckets sitting on your desk or your table, and that bucket has the code number of 013 on it with the word of brakes. The next one has 017 for tires, PM for preventive maintenance, suspension. Every part of the vehicle, whether it's a tractor, a trailer, a car, a forklift, they all have the similar systems. So if we take one of the basic systems, for example, brakes is represented by the code of 013. That's the system level. Then you move into the next level down, which is the assembly. Are you working on front brakes, which is by the code of 001? Is it rear brakes, 002? So there's a limited list of assembly codes, and then you have your component code where you get very granular. So in the case of brakes, did we do a brake drum? Did we do a brake shoe kit? What specifically did we do? So as this VMRS data is being collected, it's at the shop floor level from the technicians and mechanics. It's being, if you kind of visualize going back to the bucket again, the bucket is split in half. Half of the bucket is parts, half of it's labor. So the labor activities are being recorded in the labor section. The parts are going into the half of the bucket that's the part. But in each half of that bucket is virtually, think of all your assets in there too. So as all of this is being recorded in the background for a particular asset, hey, it's putting the labor where it belongs, it's putting the parts where it belongs, and it's doing this by the VMRS code. So where is that helpful for reducing costs. Now you can look at your data and go, okay, hey, we're spending, a tremendous amount of money on brakes, but, is it front brakes or rear brakes? Okay, well, we're narrowing it down to the fact that, okay, it's rear brakes. So why are we spending so much money? Or do we need to look at, different brake shoes? Do we need to look at, an ABEX lining, for example? Is it where the trucks are running? Is it, certain conditions? Excuse me, there's a lot of factors that can play into that. And again, you can also look at your labor costs by VMRS. So if you're doing comparisons on, the standard is, hey, it takes 4 hours to do a brake job, and we're seeing that, it's taking everyone 6 hours, 7 hours. What's the actual challenge that we're dealing with here? Do we need to retrain technicians and mechanics? Do we need to add tooling in? What might it be to make that process better? So again, these buckets, as I'm talking about, by VMRS, really play a substantial piece of being able to understand your asset better to work through the what, the why, and the how to make the better decisions. Excuse me. The same with going into the inventory. Now you can track your inventory by VMRS. You can make better decisions on buying. Have a little bit more purchasing power through the VMRS. So there is a true value to the VMRS in multiple ways. As I mentioned a few minutes ago when I was talking the one slide about inventory and planning, controlling, leading, organizing, and how this actually can help with reducing costs. These are two pictures of a before and after of a parts room that I truly had done an actual reset on. I literally walked into the place on day one and was just like, oh my gosh. And the customer asked me on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think we are? And I said, well, maybe a 1 at most. And so they opted to do a parts room reset. And as you can see, the before and afters are, truly entirely different pictures. And when we did the setup of this parts room, they were not 100% familiar with the VMRS. So I went through and explained to them, hey, this is the value. This is, what important part it can play. So we actually set their parts room up by VMRS coding. So we put, everything that was brake related together, everything that was, PM related, suspension, we set it up by that way. And they really liked the layout of that because they told me, like a year later when I had followed up that they'd hired a couple new mechanics and they were able to go into the parts room. And if they were looking for something brake related, that, hey, they could get very close to finding it because they were in the 013 VMRS system section. So again, that organization plays a large role in the day-to-day. Plus, as you go through the reorganization, it allows you to get rid of obsolete parts that you may not need, overstock that you may have that you don't know you have, which could be sent back to the vendor for them to issue a credit back to your organization or your fleet. Next, I want to talk a little bit about, again, best practices, organizing the storeroom, which I pretty well mentioned and talked on. Next is the run your obsolete report, sell back again your obsolete parts for credit. Make an attempt at that. If you can't, then next option is to scrap it to get the scrap money. I've always been a fan of when I walk into a parts room, and usually the dust on the box tells the story. If the dust is thick enough where you can write your name in the top of the box or on the part, it's usually a good indication it's been around for a while and may not need it. So again, cleaning up that inventory makes a huge difference. The parts over maximum, again, that's important to do that at a minimum on a quarterly basis to make sure that you're not overstocked on something that you don't need anymore. Set your stocking levels based on historical usage. Again, that falls back into your setting your mins and your maxes after you look at usage. And also tying into this is to not let your don't let your stock room become your vendor stock room. If you have a hard time getting some parts and you need to keep them on the shelf, great. But if your vendors are in a close proximity of your shop or shops where they're at, let them be the parts warehouse so that you're not tying money up on your shelves. Use kind of just in time demand to get the parts in as you need them. Additionally, a quarterly semi-annual review to negotiate pricing with your vendors. This is important too, because again, in the whole scheme of trying to bring your costs down for the entire fleet, being able to get a better negotiated price on parts, even if we just talk about filters for PMs, if you can save 3-4%, that's a huge difference at the end of the year. Okay. And next we have some KPI dashboards that are valuable for reporting. These images that I'm showing you, these are images from within our AMCS fleet maintenance system. This is an actual screen capture from within the system. We have asset analytics. This will give you a quick view of where your costs are at specific to your assets and your groups of assets. Work order history by VMRS coding. So again, this will give you tracking to say, hey, we're seeing a spike in tires, brakes, whatever it may be, and it'll point that out to you. Parts over maximum, again, kind of ties back to the last slide, but you can have a quick view of that on your dashboard, your home screen. Your total inventory valuation. This may seem kind of irrelevant, but at the end of the day, it's really a big piece of hey, do we have too much inventory on hand? And if we do, let's get that reduced to get that inventory value down so that it's a manageable a dollar amount and an amount that's within reason. And then the last one is on the KPI dashboard is warranty claims. Again, I'm going to dig a little bit into warranty and talk a little bit about warranty and again the importance of how that all plays into reducing the costs in your fleet. So getting a handle on your warranties, tracking warranties by either part or asset, again, is very valuable. And it's, if you think of it from the asset side, okay, when you set the warranties up and you apply the warranties to the asset, now as the work is being performed at the shop floor, the system will recognize and say, hey, by this VMRS system, assembly and component, this is covered under potential warranty, and it will actually flag that warranty and alert the technician to, hey, save the part so that they don't get discarded and thrown in the dumpster. Along with it, if the asset has actually has a warranty that's expired or is no longer valid, you still have the warranty on the part also. So when you set the warranty up on the part, if the part has a 1-year warranty and we'll say that it's installed today and it fails in 60 days from now, when that same part is put back on the same asset on the repair order or work order, it's going to flag and say this is a potential warranty, save the part. And at that point, you turn the warranty back into your vendor to either get a dollar credit or an actual part for replacement on the shelf. Getting visibility to these warranties through open warranty notifications and the warranty status notifications is really important because you can change and update your statuses as to where they're at within the system. Traditionally, again, I always, when I'm on site, like to talk in detail about warranty. warranty is really what I call a continuous improvement process within a fleet maintenance system, because ideally it's great to set it up on day one, but if you don't get it set up on day one, always keep working at it, just because of the amount of money that can be saved through the warranties. Generally, you're not going to find a vendor that's going to come to you and say, hey, do you have any warranties you want to turn in? You've traditionally got to give the warranties back to them and then keep a track of it to reclaim that money and or those parts then. So last kind of wrapping this up here, as far as the a real life example of how a reduction in the cost of the fleet made a difference. When I was on site with the customers, this was probably going back 2-3 years ago, and I was training the mechanics and technicians on VMRS and the importance of it. The manager at that time, had kind of said, hey, I want to throw some information in here to share with the group. And he had actually come from another fleet that was utilizing and using VMRS coding. And what he explained to the group was that, or his technicians, we want you to use this, and here's why, because here's what it can do in terms of savings. So what actually happened with this fleet was they had spread axle trailers like this, and when the trailers were coming into the shop, they had a huge spike in the replacement of the tires, specifically the outer tire on the front spread axle. And as they were doing the repair orders and work orders, the technicians were coding the work in, and they were specifying it, hey, this is a tire we replaced. And as they started to analyze the data using the VMRS, saying, hey, this was a tire that was replaced on the spread axle, the data just kept pointing out month after month that, we've got a huge spike in the cost of these tires, or the replacement of these tires. So as they dug into this and looked at this a little bit deeper, they found that what was happening, drivers were actually turning too close to the curbs. The tire on the spread axle was catching the curb, ripping the tire up, causing it to have to be replaced. Once all this was determined and discovered, they then opted to relate it back to the workforce. Then they pulled in the drivers, had a driver training, and I don't remember the exact number, but I remember it was something like, I want to say $15,000 or $20,000 a month that they were spending on these tires. They brought the drivers in, workforce, retrained them, explained to them what was going on, and instantly they seen a drop that went from 20,000, it dropped down to like 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 the next month. So the moral of the story is there's a huge power in VMRS. There's which all ties back to a fleet maintenance system, and a system that has a solution such as what we offer through AMCS, which also ties into it with the warranty, the inventory management, and everything in general. So again, I just like to share that story because it's a real life example, and it really did happen. And it to this day, they've had a reduction in their tire costs, which again we all know is a very high cost within the industry. So we're going to move on to questions and answers.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dean, for all that great information. We are indeed moving on to the Q&A portion of our webinar, so please get your questions in, and we'll get started peppering Dean with some questions here. The VMRS codes, it's funny, that's been around in some form or fashion since I think the 70s, gotten more and more complex. Can you suppress the VMRS codes within the system, like the ones that aren't relevant, I guess, to what you're doing?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, Deborah. So the answer to that is yes. And the suppression of the VMRS, it can be suppressed at the high level, meaning you can suppress it at the system level, and it'll automatically make the assembly component not visible. Or if I use my brakes, for example, you can keep the system level of 013 active, but in the assembly level, if there's like 9 assemblies in there and you only want to have, like, let's say front brakes and rear brakes, you can suppress the individual ones. So yes, it can be done. And again, it's all kind of based around the type of industry you're in. And as you had mentioned, the VMRS coding system grew substantially. I mean, even from the time of when I started with AMCS dossier till now, it's expanded a lot. So yeah, the less whatever you suppress, then it's not visible, that the technicians have to pick through it and work through it. And the last piece that I add about that is that as you suppress them, and from kind of throwing this out here from an accounting side, if then from an accounting side you want to drive those VMRS costs by a repair reason, such as accident, we can point them that way. So again, then all of those get mapped, if you want to call it, by VMRS coding. So, but yeah, the simple answer to the question is yes, you can suppress.
All right, great. Let's see. Next question. When it comes to budgeting repair and maintenance costs, what are your thoughts on purchasing mechanical breakdown insurance?
There is, I guess I have some mixed emotions on that, and it's again, I think it's really comes down to the fact of, am I against it? No, but I really feel that there has to be some I guess fact finding and investigation on the front side to make sure that, okay, is there a true is there a true return value to that, and look at the factors involved. And I guess I'll just kind of throw this out there. It's like, hey, if you have a specific shop that you have a service truck for that can handle whatever that mileage area would be from your shop, then potentially I would say no. But if you have an area where that it's counterproductive and doesn't make any sense cost wise to send that truck shop outside of a range, then potentially yes. So that's kind of my answer right off of the top, without really digging into it. That's, I guess, where I would kind of start, and then kind of educate and learn from there and make the best decision.
It's one of those things where it's going to depend a lot, I would think, on the specifics of your operation and on the insurance itself, and whether that's a good fit, I would think.
Yes, very true.
Still, maintenance costs, that's a lot of headaches. Emission systems, those have been giving us headaches in maintenance for a while now. Recommendations about reducing costs related to truck emission systems.
Oh boy, I don't even really know where to.
I know there's a lot there.
Yeah. So the question was the recommendations to reduce maintenance costs related to truck emission systems. I really wish I had an actual great answer for that. I guess the only thing that I can say from the front side and being in shops and in fleets is the emission systems are here to stay. Okay, for the most part, you can't get around them. As I was in a couple shops and they were telling me, and I looked at the whole system that they had to replace and take out on the Pacific chassis. the cost was astronomical on this, the whole emission piece of it. That was the worst case scenario. So I guess, how to control that cost would be research the systems on the front side before you buy the equipment and find out, okay, if we have to change this, what kind of a cost are we going to have involved in it? Because maybe it's, a less cost for the purchase, but in the repair side, it's it's going to be a big cost. So maybe you want to go with a different type of truck. I mean, excuse me, it's just a tough question to answer because, there's so much breakdown related to it and, the whole process of it. So, I mean, that's really kind of the best answer. I wish I could be more specific, but that's, I think, really just kind of the best place to start with it is to educate yourself and try and make some educated decisions on the front side.
We hear a lot about artificial intelligence these days, and its opportunities to address some of those cost areas. I'm thinking, like, I've heard a lot, like route optimization, for instance. Any thoughts on AI and how that? I know we're kind of early days, but how that might help fleets keep these rising costs down.
So it's interesting you bring that up because going back to that trade publication I was mentioning, they talk about AI in there and how it will and can, if it's set up correctly, makes a difference. It's obviously got to be done right, managed right, and it does show an improvement. Or improvements. There's, again, I think you have to, like with everything else, you really have to educate yourself, ask a lot of questions, make sure you understand it, and if you do go to implement it and utilize it, take baby steps with it. Maybe start out, small, a small group of assets, try it, make sure you understand it, and then, expand from there. So is there an added value to it? Yes, I really feel that there is, and it's here to stay. It's not going to go away by any means. Unfortunately, it's kind of, it's like the emissions. So yeah, it's again an education process. It's kind of a continuous improvement, like everything else, to help reduce the cost in the fleet.
All right, Dean. Well, I think we are at about up to our time limit here. Thanks for the time that you've taken today to answer questions and share these insights on keeping costs down. For anyone who asked a question that wasn't answered, we'll follow up by email. We hope everyone enjoyed today's webinar. Once again, thank Dean Vogel and AMCS Group for today's presentation. And I also want to mention that you'll be able to get this webinar on demand on the Heavy Duty Trucking website at truckinginfo.com/webinars. So if you want to direct a colleague or somebody to that or listen to it again, you can do that. So thanks again for joining us, to our audience, and to Dean Vogel again.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Hope everyone enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day.